Psychonauts follows Raz, a young acrobatic circus performer who runs away from his traveling caravan to pursue his psychic potential at a summer camp for psychics. If you didn't already guess it from the acrobatics detail, this game is an action platformer with some puzzle elements. And just like the rest of the platformers of the era, there's a hub world, the camp, and various mental worlds, which would be the levels. Think if Mario 64 had a love child with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. While the game looks like it was made for a younger audience, I was surprised at the overabundant use of random talk of suicide, and whatever this is. But then again, I'm sure I had the same vocabulary when I was a 10-year-old, so what do I know? And although some of the gags and lines felt targeted towards a younger audience, there were mentions of 401ks, references to mass murder, and even a peeping Tom, so you can probably see why I'm in such a dilemma. Right from the get-go, Psychonauts breaks away from the vast majority of games from the time period, and instead of a title menu, we're prompted to start the game through actual gameplay, which is honestly rare even now, 15 years later. The first word that comes to mind is charm, and this can be seen all throughout the game. And we'll discuss more on this, but as vaguely as possible, because if I somehow convince you to play this game, you'll want to enter with a blank slate. Psychonauts eventually went on to become a cult classic, with a sequel finally coming out later this year, but the game was considered a commercial failure, even with critical acclaim. The game released on PlayStation, Xbox, and Windows in 2005, but still couldn't sell more than 100,000 copies, and was believed to cause then-publisher Majesco's CEO to resign. In fact, Psychonauts' success didn't begin until more than 6 years after its launch, when platforms like Steam and Humble Bundle began to pick them up, as well as Xbox and PlayStation re-releasing the games digitally as classics. But enough with the history lesson. Graphically, the game still holds up. The interface and cinematics are a little abrasive on the eyes at times, but there is a widescreen fix out there for at least the interface, which I have linked in the description. And while even in 2005 it wasn't the best looking game compared to other releases, the game had its own visual charm. I found optimization to be pretty solid, and while experienced a few crashes, 3 to be exact, each time the game left me off in the exact position I was in when the game crashed. But otherwise the game performed well, and I couldn't find any compatibility issues, which is great considering the game could run on just about anything. What the game lacked graphically, it wholly made up for with its orchestral score. Even after putting the game down, I can easily duplicate the strums of the camp's tune in my head. There are plenty of other scores that complemented the gameplay and the specific character's mental world and helped create the perfect atmosphere for the locale. But this is all to be expected from Pete McConnell, who's created the scores for the majority of the pre-2000 Star Wars games, as well as the Sly Cooper trilogy, and more recently Hearthstone. While the music is great, I found the rest of the sound design to be a bit dull. Some audio carried way too far, like these bear sounds. Where are these even coming from? Voice acting was solid, and the only portions of bad voice acting were intentional, but that's to be expected with a cast rich with voice actors from popular cartoons of the early 2000s.
Listen, I'm sorry, but I can't train you. Agent Vodello would kill me.
Sorry. Ah! Oh my god! Ah!
Are you okay?
He's dead.
I personally had issues with the audio having random cuts and some voice lines being overbearingly loud, but when looking into this I couldn't find too much, so it might just be localized to me. But overall, these are just minor gripes. As a collection, I found the audio to fit well in most scenarios. Speaking of collections, let's talk about the game's collectibles, because there are plenty of them and they're a pretty big part of the game. There are 7 types of collectibles and a currency system. In one way or another, collectibles are attributed to your Psi rank, which is Psychonauts' version of a leveling system. There are 101 Psy ranks. Every 5 to 10 ranks you'll get a new ability or upgrade an existing one. The spare point was probably put in by accident, which Steam seems to joke at. Let's go over the currency system, because that's one thing I felt that they should have done without. Scattered through the camp, we'll find streams of purple. If we walk up and press Y, we'll get a single arrowhead. Arrowheads are used for one thing and one thing only, to buy 4 items from the camp shop. After you've walked up to 50 of these purple nodes, you can go to the camp store and buy a Dowsing Rod. The Dowsing Rod helps you get more arrowheads. By doing this awful little minigame where you run around with a metal detector and mash Y, you'll be rewarded with anywhere between 20 and 200 arrowheads. You'll have to keep doing this for about 15 minutes because you'll need 1,330 arrowheads if you want to finish the game. 800 for a Cobweb Duster, which I'll discuss in just a second. 400 for a magnet upgrade, which will attract nearby health and ammo. And lastly, 190 for the 19 Psycores you'll need, which I'll also discuss in just a bit. This is excluding the chunk you'll need at one of the later levels to buy paintings, because I assume you'll just collect those passively. What is the actual point of having me run around with this rod? What developer thought that this was a great mechanic, then had someone playtest it, and they too thought this should be included? But I digress. Let's go to the rest of the collectibles. From the get-go, literally before we can even play the game, we learn about Psycards and Psycores. Psycards are scattered all throughout the camp and the asylum. If we collect 9 of them, we can combine them with a core, purchased from the camp store, to gain a Psy rank. We can also find a few already complete as we play the game, but they're pretty infrequent. Like Psycards, early on we'll learn about scavenger hunt items. There are 16 of them scattered throughout the campground. You'll primarily collect these as you unlock more abilities, but some of them are just hidden throughout the campground and require a watchful eye. Turning 8 of these into the Ranger will reward us with 5 Psy ranks. These are pretty enjoyable to collect, and you can find all 16 pretty early on in the game. In the last hub area, we can collect jarred brains. There are 19 of these, and they aren't too hard to miss. None of them come to mind that I really had to search for. Each one you return will slightly increase Raz's health. Oh come on, don't handle the brains like that, that's how you spread disease. While we're on the topic of brains, we'll find the rest of our collectibles in the various mental worlds we explore. Our most common finds are figments. These are scattered through every brain. Collecting them all can be a bit tedious, but it's not impossible. Each one you collect rewards a random point value. For every 100 points you'll get a Psy rank. My big annoyance was that some of these were near impossible to see. Just look at this. Pastel colored figments on a pastel colored backgrounds. My eyes are too old for this. If you miss one, it's not the end of the world, but I'd recommend just pulling up a guide and using that to figure out where the missing piece is, otherwise you'll be going through the level again. Once we've purchased the Cobweb Duster from the shop, we'll have the opportunity to collect mental cobwebs found scattered through each level. You can weave each cobweb into one Psycard, with 54 in total to collect. While it seems like something you could skip, it's not. You'll reach a point in the game where the only means of progression is blocked by a web. So while you don't have to collect all the webs, you can't go without the duster. Each mental world also contains 5 pieces of emotional baggage. Each piece of baggage will require a corresponding luggage tag found on that world. The baggage is fairly easy to find as they can be heard sobbing through each world, but the tags you'll have to hunt for. These can be skipped in the collection process as they only reward Psychonauts concept art. Our final collectibles are memory vaults. 2 of these can be found in each world. Finding one will let you look through a reel of memories of the character whose mind the vault is in. Once again, these can be skipped since they only contribute to the game's lore. All collectibles were easily tracked through the menu, which made the tedium of finding that one last card you missed so much more bearable. I wish more games did this because it's much more encouraging than being left to wonder what you missed in what area. There are technically 3 other sets of collectibles, being an increase of ammo in the Confusion Bomb, Psyblast ammo, and lives, but one of the Psy ranks gives you infinite ammo, and I doubt you'd ever find yourself losing more lives than what you start the game with, since you get pretty beefy towards the end of the game. Gameplay-wise, as the genre implies, we'll be doing plenty of platforming and fighting. I found the beginning of the game nicely paced. As you progress, you'll earn merit badges. Each badge rewards Rasputin with a new psychic ability, enhancing his combat strength. Throughout the game, we'll earn telekinesis, pyrokinesis, psyblast, levitation, invisibility, a shield, clairvoyance, and lastly a confusion bomb. All of these abilities are upgradable through Psyranks, but things don't get too crazy since the upgrades, for the most part, just increase the duration of said psychic ability, enhance their damage, or just give them an area of effect. Like other platformers of the mid-2000s, we'll be going through grind rails, walking on tight ropes, and completing Olympics-level acrobatic routines. One major issue plaguing the platformer genre is poor camera angles, and Double Fine crushes it in Psychonauts, with quite possibly one of the greatest free cameras I've ever had the opportunity to use, even if the settings are a bit lacking. I genuinely can't think of any platformers that even come close to matching the quality of the camera controls. My one minor complaint is that once you've received the levitation upgrade, the majority of the game's challenges become trivial. Besides hovering you off the ground, in Psychonauts, levitation will give us greatly increased speed, jumping ability, and an infinite glide. This combination makes a majority of the platforming that was obviously designed for your normal run and double jump a breeze. I also found that the speed and momentum you'd build while levitating would completely negate some of the boss's mechanics. I mean, look at this. The Den Mother can't even attempt an attack before I've sent her into the next phase. Bar that though, I felt the pacing of the bosses was excellent. Some of the later bosses are a bit on the easier side if you kept up your Psy rank the entire game, but each one makes excellent use of a variety of your psychic powers. Each boss felt unique enough, but didn't require a highly skilled research and development team to figure out the tactics. Level-wise, each mental world fit thematically with what we see that particular character as. When I thought I'd begin to get bored with platforming and combat, I'd be reeled back in by the Psychonauts' take on a game of Risk, or even whatever this is. No two levels felt the same, which is hard to say considering the monotony that's associated with the genre. And now that I look back, the proportion of puzzles they utilize is just perfect. Whether it was helping a washed-up actress battle her inner self-doubt, a conspiracy theorist finally overcome his anxiety, or an artist finally overcome past trauma, each world kept it fresh and exciting. As for the story, while I did enjoy it, I couldn't help but create a connection between Rasputin's time at the summer camp and any early 2000s Nickelodeon or Disney Channel show that had a freshman in high school. As an adult, some of the voice lines were borderline cringy, but in an almost endearing, nostalgic way. We learn a lot about the camp and its lore through the game's dialogue options, which serve to expand on the game's lore or to deduce your next steps, instead of creating interactivity, which is what I originally assumed, so don't expect Fallout levels of interaction. The various signs and boards also serve as a history lesson and explain what caused the enhanced psychic properties associated to the area, as well as helping you develop the relationships the campers have with one another. As for Rasputin, when he's not in the camp, he and the other children are being psychically trained by their three teachers, Stolen Valor, Budget Neo from the Matrix, and Woodstock Hippie. Once he's completed those three mental worlds, the tutorial is basically complete, which I found to be one of the lengthier tutorials in any game I've played. As Raz learns about the camp, he learns that something is amiss, but before he can inform his new teachers, they rush off to official business. This is when the game really picks up. All of a sudden, the children start losing their brains, and it's up to Rasputin to get to the bottom of whatever's going on, and he only has one night to do it all. The remainder of the game has Raz help various characters come to terms with their past and their demons by solving a puzzle or conflict within their mind. This allows Raz to proceed through the asylum, which becomes a secondary hub as we proceed through the game. I'm trying to keep things as vague as possible, as the charm of Psychonauts is highly driven by the story. At the time of writing, the game is only $10 on both Steam and GOG, but frequently can be seen in the Humble Bundle and on sale. Psychonauts is considered one of the greatest titles in the platforming genre, and as such, I'm giving away 2 copies so you can experience Psychonauts for yourself. All you have to do to enter is comment below, and I'll select the winners randomly in the next video through a comment picker. The game is only about a 10-hour commitment, so you won't have to give up a week to finish it. Even if you aren't a fan of the platformer genre, I'd simply recommend giving the game a shot, and letting the hypnosis set in from there. As always, thank you for watching, and thank you to my patrons Mary and Nibs for your continued support.